Good afternoon, and thank you to each of our students, families, staff, and community members who are joining us this afternoon for our live Zoom webinar. My name is Everett Davis, and today I will serve as your facilitator. First and foremost, I stand before you today as the MCPS parent of 3, including a high school student. I want to recognize and share my empathy for the many mixed emotions that many of you are experiencing. I felt those same emotions as I returned home last night to process the day's events with my high school son. In addition, I come before you today as the former principal of Redland Middle School, having proudly served the Magruder cluster. In addition, I come before you as the acting associate superintendent for student and family support and engagement, the student services arm of our system. This afternoon is not about me, but about each of you in this virtual space and how we will work together to have an open and honest discussion that will lead to recovery. As our interim superintendent, Dr. Mcknight, shared, yesterday's incident weighs heavily on our community's sense of safety. It is now up to all of us to commit to returning that sense of safety, which begins right now with today's meeting. Having served in the Magruder cluster for 6 years and having worked closely with Dr. Evans, as well as with the central office leadership who supports this cluster, I know and value the strength, resiliency, and commitment of the educators who support the safety, security, and well-being of each and every student every single day. Also, I know that it takes a village to raise a child and that this effort has been and will continue to be a pre-K through post-12th grade endeavor. It is time to come together as a community and commit ourselves to supporting each other as we process this unsettling incident. Before we get too far into our session, I want to remind you that what happened is an ongoing investigation and some specific questions may not be answered. We will discuss all we can and how we intend to proceed in the coming days in order to support our students, staff, and community when we return to school. Also, I want to remind you of a letter that was shared last night that provides access to resources, including direct access to our MCPS counselors, psychologists, and other student family support and engagement staff, as well as to our colleagues and employee assistants and support, EAP support for students and staff, our employee assistance program, also known as EAP. If we could go to the next slide, please. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started to ensure that our 1 hour together is most productive and efficient. Because this is a Zoom webinar, there are several enhanced features to support your experience, and they're listed here. As you can see, there will be no camera or microphone access available to our participants. Also, we encourage you to ask your questions in the chat using that Q&A feature. You will see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And just to be clear, the chat is unavailable. So just want to emphasize that again, the chat is unavailable. And one more time, please, we encourage you to enter your questions in the Q&A, and we have allocated time for that during our time together. Next slide, please.
Mr. Davis, I apologize for interrupting, but a reminder about how to access Spanish language interpretation. If you need it, it's at the bottom of your screen and you click on the circle that looks like a globe, and there is live translation occurring.
Yes, thank you for that reminder, Dr. Sergo. Tenemos intérprete en español. Aquí está una parte que está, dice interpretación, y ustedes necesitan hagan clic para recibir el lenguaje en español, la presentación en español. So just wanted to make sure everyone does know that. Again, our Spanish interpretation. Thank you, Dr. Sergo. And so moving forward, I do want to turn it over to the presentation over to Dr. Evans. I want to give him an opportunity to walk you through an itinerary of, or actually before I do that, I want to walk you through an itinerary of how we will spend our time together before I do turn it over to Dr. Mcknight and to Dr. Evans, how we will spend our time together today, framing our meeting, Dr. Evans will walk you through the incident timeline. We'll talk a little bit about the communication timeline. We do have our support from the MC Police Department, who's here for us as well, Chief Jones. So thank you for joining us. We will hear from him. We'll hear about some mental health resources as we move forward with recovery. Also, any next steps, and as I said, we will allocate time for Q&A. So that's a little bit of how we'll spend our time together today. Next slide, please. And so I did want to introduce, again, before we go too far into our presentation, and welcome and thank our panelists for being here with us today. We are joined by our interim superintendent, Dr. Mcknight. Also, who you will hear from in just a moment. Also, as I mentioned, we do have Dr. Evans here, and thank you to him as well, to all of our panelists for their just amazing leadership and support throughout this tumultuous period. Also, Dr. Sergo, who you have seen and heard from, as well as our Director in School Support and Improvement, Mr. Clark, our Director of System-Wide Safety and Security, Chief Jones, who I mentioned, our Chief of Police, and also Dr. Conley Chester, who is our Director of Psychological Services and Student and Family Support and Engagement, who you will hear from as well. But I would be remiss if I did not recognize the entire Magruder administrative team for their support, their unwavering leadership, their commitment, again, to maintain safety and security and well-being for our entire community, not just during yesterday's incident, but on an ongoing basis. And I just, again, want to recognize each of them, Dr. Vega Ormeño, Mr. Haas, Mr. Montgomery, Mr. Gertson, Ms. Kimball, Mr. Franco, and Mr. Nelson. Again, thank you for your support and service to the Magruder cluster and to the community. Next slide, please. So at this time, again, it is a pleasure and an honor to introduce, to bring forward Dr. Mcknight, who will share remarks with you. Dr. Mcknight?
Yes, thank you, Everett, and good afternoon. And I want to thank all of you for being here this afternoon. An incredibly difficult day yesterday in our community. I think we were changed forever after the experience that we had yesterday. And our goal is to be able to process, discuss, and learn how moving forward, we will make changes for the better. I want to begin by also offering my thoughts and prayers to the student victim and his family. And I know that we all stand behind them and hoping that that student does have a quick and full recovery. There are a number of people that I see here on the screen today that yesterday, given the circumstances, we could not have made it through without so many of you. And I'm afraid that I would miss someone. I just want to thank everybody that I can see who is here, just being here today and being a part of this conversation, saying that you want to hear, you want to talk, you want to discuss, and you want to be a part of everything that we need to know to just reflect on how we move forward. And I want to thank you for that. Chief Jones, I know that you're here, and I want to say thank you, and thank you to the entire Montgomery County Police Department and the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department. I mean, the way you all got to the school quickly and were able to respond quickly, and all of the things that went into yesterday's work, I am just grateful for the strong working relationship that we have with you and all of our law enforcement partners. And Dr. Lee Evans, I have had the pleasure of knowing you for years, and I just want to say thank you, Dr. Evans, for being the principal yesterday, leading through a very difficult time. I want to thank you and all of the Magruder staff for everything you did to protect and support the students yesterday who looked to you at a time in which they all felt vulnerable, and I'm sure you felt vulnerable. So I just want to thank you all for that, because it truly was carrying the weight for everyone, and that's what leaders do. And I just know that we're going to continue to support you in the coming days and the coming weeks and moving forward. And that's why we're here. And again, we're here because we're so appreciative for you moving our students and our staff and our families through everything that had to be done yesterday. Yesterday, I said this in our press conference, and I want to say it again. If we have any students online, to you, I want to say thank you. I am so very proud of the way you responded in the midst of such a traumatic experience yesterday. Everybody did what they were supposed to do. given those circumstances. And that's what made it successful, or as successful as it could be. And the staff members at Magruder throughout the system, you have the support here. We're here, and in the coming days, if you want to talk, reflect, share whatever is on your mind, we're here to listen, and we want to make sure you feel that support. I'm not going to take a lot of time because I do want to get into the discussion today, but I want to say that safety and security is at the top of our priority list here in the school system. And I pledge that we are going to thoroughly review this incident in collaboration with our law enforcement partners, our Magruder staff who were there and a part of it, living through what happened, our students, our parents, and our community members, everyone, to learn every single detail that we can about the incident and what we can do to make our schools safer. It is an immediate concern of mine, and how we support the students and staff now and when they return to the building on Tuesday is going to be key. We know, I know, you know, that every student will react to this incident in their own way, and some are going to need ongoing support to process exactly what happened and what occurred and how they're going to handle their feelings. And today I want to discuss what specific steps we also took to make sure we were supporting students. And students and staff, if you are listening, I know yesterday was a very busy day and we had support set up for you in the evening. And I know that dismissal went much longer, but that support is set up throughout this weekend. And I am encouraging you all to take part in it, engage in the sessions that are there for you, because just sometimes having the opportunity to sit and talk with someone about what you experience, you walk away feeling like you've left some of the burden with them. So please take advantage of that. I also know that there are concerns about how long it took to get the students out of the building once the situation was resolved. Dr. Evans is going to discuss that in his timeline of how things occurred yesterday. But when we lock down a school, there is a very specific process that we go through to release students. And most importantly, we make sure that everyone in that building is accounted for, every single student. And so when we personalize a situation like that, which is exactly what we must do in those circumstances, it is going to take a period of time. And I know that caused anxiety and frustration and concern for everyone, but also know making sure we were protecting every single individual student and how they were safely reunited with their family was exactly what we needed to do. And at a school as large as Magruder, that can take a large amount of time. So we're going to take questions and answer them today. Yesterday was an extremely difficult day for everyone, but especially our Magruder students, staff, and parents. And while we don't even have all of the answers yet, hopefully today we are going to be at the beginning of a conversation of how we can make Magruder and all MCPS schools safe and secure learning environments for our children. So with that, thank you. And Mr. Davis, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Mcknight. At this point, I want to give an opportunity for our community to hear from Dr. Evans, our principal at Magruder High School. So I'm going to turn it over to him at this time. Dr. Evans, I believe, yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. And again, thank you, Dr. Mcknight. I want to first start by welcoming all of our Magruder families and any students that and staff members who are on this webinar with us. I certainly want to applaud our students and the many staff members who, especially members of our administrative team and our security staff, for taking the right steps to make sure that we could secure the safety of our students and staff during this very, very difficult time. I want to take this opportunity to thank Chief Jones and all of the members of his department for the excellent work that they did. I want to thank the Sheriff's Department, who continues to provide us support. And also a special thank you to members of our central office staff who were there with us throughout this very, very challenging time. This, as I said, was an extremely difficult situation. I want to send my thoughts and prayers to the family of the victim, and certainly we pray for his speedy recovery. He is doing fairly well. He is certainly doing well after his surgery. So we will continue to reach out to him and his family and support them in any way we can. I also want to thank the members of this panel who are coming here today to provide an update this communication update is very, very important to our community. I want to start my conversation by framing the meeting in terms of the concerns and the communication, and later I'll get into the timeline. The crisis response is driven by a focus on ensuring student safety while providing information to our families. The care for the student victim and his family was also extremely important, and we reached out very early to his parents to make sure that they were fully aware, as we were doing everything that we could in collaboration with Fire and Rescue to ensure his health and safety. We recognize that this is a difficult time and upsetting situation. So in making sure that the students and staff who were in lockdown to inform this as much as we could in terms of what was taking place. And understand that we are committed to providing support in the short term and the long term. Student well-being and safety is at the top of our list. And those of you who've participated in any of our discussions, whether you're part of the PTSA meetings or community forums, you know that this is crucial. And we certainly look to learn from what took place yesterday. And again, I want to commend our students, our staff, the county, and our police partners for their coordinated response. And this was very, very thorough and very intense. And whenever the police come on the scene for something like this, they are in control. And I just want to applaud the manner in which they set up a central command and facilitated this with the help of our staff. This wouldn't have gotten done if there were not a partnership where we worked side by side. And last of all, I want to appreciate our families for their support and caring for us and one another. We received some really heartwarming emails of support from our families. So I think it is very important that we as a community continue to work hard to maintain this partnership from home and school. So it's important, not just in terms of student safety and staff safety and well-being, but also in our mission as an academic institution. Next slide. So I want to go now and talk to you a little bit about the incident timeline and what took place. And as Mr. Davis said, there are some things that, because this is an ongoing investigation, that we will not be able to share. So we don't want to contaminate that investigation. So we're going to share those the information that we're able to forward to you as a community. So here's what happened. During a regular hall sweep by security, the one bathroom was checked. The security staff identified an injured student that was in the bathroom. And at the time, we did not know the extent of his injury. The nurse was called and working with, as she examined the student, we found that we need to call 911 and to ask for their assistance. Immediately, we contacted the student and student's parents, and he was transported to one of the local hospitals. And we've learned that he is in stable condition as he continues to recover from his injury. Montgomery County Police Department reported on site and initiated their incident command and started their thorough investigation. In support of this, the Montgomery County Public Schools crisis team was activated and reported to our school. Next slide. Now, following the incident, we were in close contact with our students and staff doing this. We sent emails to the teachers so that they would be aware of what was taking place. And this was, as Dr. Mcknight shared, a very long process. And that process took so much time because the police department wanted to be thorough as they went through every aspect of the incident, what took place, and wanted to secure the safety of every student. So again, I appreciate their work and their partnership. Following this, going class by class, we began the dismissal around 5:15. Classrooms were cleared one by one with Montgomery County Police Department and members of our security and administrative teams that were supporting them so that we would be able to certainly ensure the safety and familiarity of our students with the police department. Students were escorted to the auditorium where we started a process of identifying how each student was going to be moving on and going home. The bus riders moved to the gymnasium to be grouped by their bus route number, and I wanted to also thank the support of the Montgomery County Public Schools Transportation Department, which is just such an integral part and partners in this. Buses are staged on Muncaster Mill Road and prioritized for dismissal in order to clear the roadway. Walkers and student drivers were dismissed. Second, parent pickup was dismissed last with the police support for the traffic management. And this took a great deal of time because we had so many police vehicles there and buses. So we had to move the buses through so that we could clear the entrance and exits from the school. The final students were dismissed and cleared by 7 p.m. Next slide. This is really important because this is the communication timeline where we sought to inform the community as best that we could with the information that we had and what was going on at the school. So we sent a Connect Ed message out at 1:29 p.m. and at 2:14 p.m. This is a brief statement of what was going on and the fact that we were in a lockdown. At 5:06 p.m. and 7:45 p.m., we had an event update and resource links were sent out. Communication was also sent out via Twitter at 2:28 p.m. and at 5:22 p.m. to reach out to students and families as well. Emails to staff and the stand-up staff meeting took place at 6:30 p.m. once we had was sure that students were safe and they were dismissed completely. Touch points were made with our PTSA president and Montgomery County Council of PTA cluster coordinators, as well as the Montgomery County Council of PTA, the president of that, and all of our parents and guardians in the Magruder High School. Next slide.
So I think now we're going to turn it over to Mr. Ed Clark. And go, Ed, your sound isn't working?
Can you hear me now, Dr. Sergo?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. As the Chief Safety Officer, MCPS will continue to work with Chief Jones in this investigation, as well as the incident review. I want to thank Chief Jones and his department, as well as all of our law enforcement and fire and rescue partners that provided support and assistance in resolving yesterday's crisis. At this point, we'll hear from our Chief of Police, Chief Marcus Jones, who provides some updated information on yesterday's crisis. Chief Jones, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Clark, and thank you to Dr. Mcknight and all of our participants today, as well as Dr. Evans. Again, I want to express our sincere thoughts and prayers to the Magruder High School community. It is very disheartening, we know, to be involved in a very traumatic situation as it was yesterday. This is always something that we never hoped to happen. But I must applaud the staff of Magruder High School, as well as the staff of the Montgomery County Public School System on a well-executed plan in regards to locking down the school in a safe and efficient manner, as we have partnered and worked with them over the years in training and being prepared for unfortunately such a day. There's many times that we always do drills, and we realize that that's a matter of just going through the motions. But yesterday, reality set in, and that it must be executed in a way that is going to have a positive outcome in the end. And at the end of the day, we did succeed, and that will go all of us by no other student being injured, no other injuries to anyone, and the capture of the student who was involved in this unfortunate incident. So again, my thoughts and prayers are with the victim and his family. We continuously stay on top and work with the hospital staff to stay up to speed on his conditioning. There is still a lot of work to do in this investigation. And my staff is still working through this weekend to really find out what happened in this particular situation. There is an opportunity that we'll have to have one day to be able to, again, speak, for example, with the victim. We have not spoken with the victim as of yet to understand exactly what happened. And we've got other witnesses to interview in order for us to be able to, again, successfully and really understand what occurred on yesterday. But what I would like to share with the Magruder community is really what was the role of the police yesterday, why some decisions were made, and I take full responsibility as we have done whenever we have these types of incidents, that we are the incident commanders of this particular of a particular crime that has occurred, unfortunately, in a school setting that impacts, again, as we all know, the large amount of school and staff at that particular location. And then it really does spread out to the rest of the community with parents and loved ones alike. But at the end of the day, one of the things that I want to make perfectly clear is that it must be understood that we needed to know what occurred, who was involved, and how could we bring this incident to a successful close without, again, anyone else being hurt. So to give you really, again, once we arrived and once a determination was made, I want to stress that the original 911 call we received information, and in fact, it was a fire rescue call originally because it went out as an injured person. It was not a call that from the initial information that we received that the police will respond for that type of call. When more information was gathered about what had occurred, and we did determine that a student had been injured by a weapon, then that alerted our office to respond in an emergency fashion, which they did. It is noted that the deputy sheriff, that is the community engagement officer, who is the cluster responsible for the Magruder cluster, that deputy sheriff responded quickly upon hearing about this call, and other officers from the 6th district in Gaithersburg responded to the Magruder High School because this school belongs in the district of for that particular the police station. Now we also need to talk about what happened and sort of, again, determining what level of threat has occurred here. So upon arrival on the scene, officers realized immediately, based on information that was shared to some degree, again, that we had a student who had been shot. Again, the student was transported, as we know, to a nearby hospital. But in the midst of that, we needed to know who was involved in this particular situation, who was potentially the suspect, and potentially who else were witnesses, but most importantly, who was the suspect and where was that suspect? What we did know was that the school had gone into lockdown. So therefore, there was no one roaming the halls. There was sufficient information being shared through technology and others that we knew that nobody was in our halls. So we did not have an active shooter at that particular event that was occurring. And that was very important for us to realize, because then that changes really the how we operationally continue to function in our roles, as how do we, again, move throughout the school in order to be able to try again to figure out what had occurred. The other reality was, not only are we asking what happened, but we want to know where and who was the suspect in this particular event. And working with MCPS staff and Magruder's staff primarily to determine who this possible student was, we had to go through several resources in order to be able to figure that out. In fact, it took a tip from outside that we were able to determine who was the possible shooter in this particular case. And so with that being said, again, we had to figure out not only who this person was, but where was this person? And the reality is, what do we do as far as any other further communication as we are going through this investigation? And so it took some time for us to figure out who this individual was and where this individual possibly was located. Then I want to make sure that everyone is very clear to understand that one of my main concerns, the moment that I arrived and as we were determining this information, was that we were not going to create a moment that may spark another event that might have caused additional harm to anyone. So we wanted to do this in the most strategic way in order to make sure that our students were safe at that moment in time, and the staff members, and how we could actually, again, still do our work to capture this individual without any incident at all. And we were able to do that because we did this by really slowing this down and doing a methodical review of where this individual was and information gathered through the resources in which we could utilize them through our technology to be able to understand exactly where that student was. We were able to do that. And from that standpoint, then again, we came up with a way to strategize to actually get the student and his and those individuals who were in the class nearby with him, to get them out of that room safely in a manner, and to put that individual in custody. We were also able to, after that, we still had work to do because we still needed to find evidence that potentially was involved in this incident. There was, again, still information that we did not know that still required us to slow that down. So even after we had the individual in custody, there was still more police work to be done. We had worked with the school staff to articulate to them what were some of the needs that we needed in order to make our investigation flawless to some degree, to make it that we would have no barriers. There was nobody impeding what we needed to do, and evidence was protected. As we still have to understand that there was a crime scene in the Magruder High School that needed to be protected, and we needed to come in and gather evidence even after all of the students were actually dismissed. So with that being said, again, we requested, again, from a communication standpoint, that MCPS be very limited in their communications with the community. And I want to really just give some background to why we did that. And communication via social media is an awesome tool. It is an awesome tool. And it is something that I think that a lot of people feel like that is the way that the world works, and that we need to be able to put information out quickly so people are always informed. But I want to make sure that people understand, as we were strategically trying to figure this out, that what we did know was the fact that students also had cell phones, and that what our other fear was that the suspect may have had a cell phone, and if we are tweeting out information that might be beneficial to that suspect, that could be dangerous in its own right. So therefore, this is one of the reasons why we did not communicate so much in a manner from the police perspective, and the request that MCPS adhere to. And I appreciate their partnership and cooperation in that regard. I know it is very tough. I know people want to know information yesterday or just 10 minutes ago about what's happening in the world. We understand that, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we have the right information. We're going after the right individual. And then this, again, what is the most important mission is that we are actually putting the individual responsible for this in custody without any further incident. And the great news in that regard is that that was accomplished. So I just wanted to make sure that from an operational standpoint, that the community had an understanding of really why this took so long. And again, we wanted to make sure that we could get those students out of the school safely, even after all of those things have been accomplished. And we work with MCPS in that regard with their counselors as well as their staff in order to get them to their loved ones in the manner that was needed. So thank you all again for the opportunity to be able to express that. Again, this case is still under investigation. We're still trying to get some answers that we have questions for, and we just appreciate everybody's patience as we move forward to trying to obtain that goal. So thank you again for having me today.
Thank you, Chief Jones. And we are going to transition now to our mental health supports and resources with our Director of School Psychology. If we could bring forward, please, Dr. Conley Chester.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. So as we're talking with our families and our community members, we want to make sure that our families are aware of some common initial crisis reactions as there are students and staff and what they experienced yesterday. You know, some initial feelings of shock, potential anger, disbelief about what happened. And as they go through this weekend into next week, they may start to transition into feelings of grief, you know, helplessness, hopelessness, fatigue, and all different kinds of feelings that may come about due to the event and the potential trauma they have experienced from being present at school yesterday. I want people to know these are all common crisis reactions. These are things that we expect for individuals to experience, but we know that you may be experiencing this over the next week or two. But if over, let's say, a month goes by and you're still experiencing these things and you're having difficulties going to school or potentially going to work, you know, we want you to let us know so that we can make referrals for you for some additional help. We also want people to be aware of, especially if you're going through and you're having these experiences, to be aware of the types of traditional and social media that you are watching, because that can also enable what we call like secondary trauma. If you witness this and all of a sudden then you're also watching this on the news, you're watching this on social media, it does have an emotional impact. So we want to make sure that our families are aware that you may want to have your students and our staff members to limit the amount of social media and traditional media that you are watching about this particular incident. Please go to the next slide. So when experiencing things like this, we want to talk about, you know, so what are some things that you can be done in order to help to manage your stress during this time? Because we know while this is going on, we're also in the middle of a pandemic, which is also significantly stressful for many of us. And so we want to make sure that people are aware of how like your body responds to stress. You may notice like you're having dreams about what happened. Maybe you're having trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, having trouble eating, or maybe eating a lot. And so because again, stress can be manifest in a lot of multiple ways. But we want to make sure that folks know that due to what's happened and just with the ongoing situation with the pandemic, that you do have people who are here to provide support for you in helping you to manage these acute stress reactions to what has occurred. Because we know that stress impacts everybody, but we want to make sure that especially due to the stress from what's occurred, that we are providing support for our staff and our students. And we know like there's a community message that went out just to remind our families and our staff members that for staff, you know, there is EAP support for our students. We will have another Zoom session available for students from 4 to 6 p.m. It'll be split up between upperclassmen, 11th, 12th graders have a Zoom link and 9th and 10th graders have a different Zoom link. But that information went out to our families already. Next slide. And so, as if you're going through and you're realizing, or your students are realizing that they're experiencing stress, think about, what are some, positive experiences that you can go through or do at home that kind of help you, make you feel better, so forth. Trying to engage in some of these activities that help make you happy. Engaging in activities as a family, with engaging for your students, engaging with their friends, because they want to be able to feel a sense of belonging and connectedness to what's going on, but also taking time, maybe just sitting back, engaging in some deep breathing, taking a breathe in, for a few seconds, hold it, breathe out for a few seconds, and repeating that, let's say maybe about 5 times. That can also help to reduce your heart rate when you're in a place when you're feeling really stressed. And so, and always, try to make sure, like if you're getting to a place, maybe you're trying to do some of these things that normally work in helping to alleviate your stress. We have folks at school, and we also will have folks from the district who will be at your building starting on Tuesday when students return to provide additional support as well. Next slide. So again, in looking at some of these relaxation techniques, I talked about some of the deep breathing activities that you can do. There's other types of activities like muscle relaxation, when you can purposely kind of like tense up your muscles and then relax them in order, as a way of trying to help to release some of those endorphins and tension that's there in your body. Meditation, taking time to sit back in a quiet place, close your eyes, turn off the lights, and just kind of listening to the sounds around you. And just taking a moment to really try to focus in on yourself, your breathing, and what's going on, so that you can help, again, to try to decrease some of the stress that you may be experiencing. Next slide. So if you're looking for additional information about some of the things that I have discussed, we have our Be Well 365 website. We also have additional information on our Office of Student Family Support and Engagement website that has a host of resources that are available for our community. And also we have videos available from our Mental Health Awareness Week website, where you can go in and look at different topics around mental health and watch short videos that can provide additional information, and as well as information from our MCPS Waymaking series. These are videos made for families that provides additional support. Next slide. Now, if you are in need of immediate support, we want to make sure to list on here, we have the county crisis hotline number. We also have on here, if you have information about the incident and maybe you're feeling scared and maybe you don't want to report it directly, you can report it anonymously to the Maryland Safe Schools tip line, and the number is here. We also have the number for our county crisis center. If you're at a place where maybe you're feeling like you're in a mental health crisis or potentially feeling suicidal, your family can go immediately. You can call the crisis center. It's in Rockville, and they will go forth and provide an assessment for you if you are in a mental health crisis at this moment. And for our staff members, here is the number for EAP. They are taking appointments this weekend to talk to folks who may be in need of support. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Conley Chester. I'm turning it back over to Dr. Evans.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Davis, and thank you, Dr. Conley Chester, for not only being on this panel, but for all the support that you are giving our students and staff and families. So I'm going to go over some next steps, and certainly and hopes, and certainly we have the intention of letting parents know that what steps we're going to be taking to deal with this, and also in the future and in terms of security. Certainly, as Dr. Conley shared, that we will have ongoing social emotional support, and certainly providing classroom support structures, and that includes sharing with our teachers the kinds of things that they should be discussing with students. Tuesday is going to be a difficult day, and the more structure and support that we have in place, the greater the likelihood is that we can put our students in a better position to move forward. We will provide, as a follow-up as an investigation unfolds, we will provide additional information to our community. It's important that we be as transparent and as clear in what's taking place so that you will fully understand how this incident is being handled. Trust is a big aspect of what we do, and transparency and providing updated information is a huge part of gaining that trust. And then this is very important, to provide cluster support to all of our feeder schools and their families. As Mr. Davis said earlier in the presentation, is that for the Magruder cluster, education is a pre-K through 12 endeavor. And this is something that we have said throughout our time together, is that we believe that the work that needs to be done in our service area is something that we should engage in together. Every administrator has pledged this, and this is something that we've done for several years, matter of fact, for decades. So this is a big part of our next steps, because coming together as a collective team and supporting our families is crucial to creating a wholesome community that's safe, conducive to teaching and learning. Next slide, Mr. Davis. Dr. Sergo.
Yes, so Dr. Sergo and I are actually going to co-facilitate this section together. Thank you to all of our presenters thus far. As we committed, we did want to allow time for you to hear from our panel. I know that we've had ongoing live Q&A, which we've been responding to some of them, but as we said, we wanted to designate some allocated time during this session for Q&A so that, again, you can hear from our panel. So Dr. Sergo and I will again co-facilitate this session based on the Q&A. And again, we ask you to enter those questions in the Q&A, not in the chat, in the Q&A, and we will go through as many as we can during our allotted remaining time together. So Dr. Sergo, I don't know if you want to go ahead and kick us off.
Sure, thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. So there are a number of questions really around sort of security routines, security staff, things related to cameras, metal detectors, sort of search and seizure types of procedures. So I don't know, Mr. Clark or Mr. Nelson, if someone would like to speak to what our standard operating procedure is around school security.
Dr. Sergo, I'll start out. Certainly, we have safety and security teams in each of our secondary schools. They report directly to the building principal. So the Magruder team reports to Dr. Evans. Our department works with all of our principals and security team to provide training, develop practices, how the security measures are carried out at the school level and the system-wide level. So as Dr. Mcknight said, we will be reviewing all aspects of safety and security, working with the team leaders, working with the principals, working with Chief Jones, working with Dr. Conley to really do a deep dive and assess lessons learned from this critical situation. We have a requirement under the Maryland Safe to Learn Act to conduct a timely and comprehensive incident debriefing with all of our public safety partners, including the Maryland Center for School Safety. So we'll be following that up there. So again, making sure that we have good protocols in place, how these security sweeps are conducted throughout the day, how we train our staff in terms of the drills. We are required to practice 6 emergency preparedness drills throughout the academic year by law through the Maryland State Department of Education. So hopefully that may have answered some of the questions, Dr. Sir. In terms of metal detectors, that question always comes up whenever there's a crisis of this magnitude, not only within our state, but throughout the country. My former position was the director of the Maryland Center for School Safety when we had a tragic and fatal school shooting in Great Mills High School. That came up. We recently had this same conversation throughout the state of Maryland with all of our safety and security coordinators to kind of see what are some best practices out there. So we will look at all available best practices and make recommendations to close any gaps that we determine throughout the investigation.
Thank you. And Mr. Nelson or a member of the team, did you want to speak to sort of the security sweep routines that your team utilizes? How many people are on your team and what routines you utilize on a daily basis?
I don't know if Mr. Nelson is here, but if he is, I would like for him to address some of the specifics with that. But I'd like to start and saying that the security at Magruder is a collaborative effort between the administrative team and the security team. And we make every effort, number one, to have staff in the hallways, especially during the change of classes. And security does have a routine where they're moving throughout and checking in the bathrooms and stairwells. And we have 108 cameras that assist us in this process, and especially during lunch where this is monitored on a regular basis. So we do have a routine. But one of the things that's really important in terms of this situation, Mr. Clark mentioned the various drills that we have. And one of the reasons why this went so well is because we do have a drill that requires the lockdown and then shelter in place. But the most important aspect of dealing with something like this particular incident, is to have the kind of relationship with students where they will confide in you. The vast majority of our students don't want this kind of a situation to occur at their school. So we get a lot of information from students. But when something like this occurs and it actually takes place, is because that aspect is missing when we don't hear anything. And, you know, we don't have metal detectors to determine whether or not there's a weapon entering our school. So we have to use that trust, and we work very hard on building those kinds of relationships that where students will provide information at least where we can start an investigation or that process of looking into something. So that's essentially what we do. And it's extremely important to ensure safety and security. And that's, as I said earlier, that's the top priority and focus of what we do at Magruder High School.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. And I did want to let you know that I think Dr. Circle was getting ready to share the same information, that Mr. Nelson is on board with us, just so you know. So we can.
So he should jump in and share some thought. While he's new to the school, he's been very supportive. And I'd like to say that I believe that one of the reasons why this young man, the victim, survived was because of the immediate attention that Mr. Nelson gave to him when he saw him in the restroom doing his rounds. And so in my essence, he is responsible for saving this young man's life, or at least putting him in a position where he would survive. So I certainly applaud the work of my security team and the quick response of the administrators. And that came about as a result of working together and understanding that we don't have enough administrators and security staff to cover the entire building throughout the entire day. But the fact that working together, we realized that we're going to be a lot more effective in using the technology we have through cameras, and that's both inside and outside of the building. So those are our routines, and we've been very successful with this. Like I said, when we get information which we did not have in time to prevent this from happening, when we get information, we are able to intervene, and we have a strong preventer aspect of our overall plan of prevention, intervention, and interaction maintenance of a crisis situation, which encompasses a lot of things that focuses on not only safety, but the well-being and health of everyone involved.
So thank you, Dr. Evans. We'll continue on with our Q&A. I just wanted to yield to see if you did want Mr. Nelson to share any information.
If he's here, I would like for him to share information, and I'd like the community to get to know who he is. So if he's on this call, I would very much like for him to address some of the specific things, and for the community to get to know who he is.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me.
We can hear you, but we can't see you. Do you have the ability to offer camera access?
Let me do my best. I apologize for the picture displayed. That's my wonderful wife, and I'm currently using her computer at this time. So rather than prove that I'm not that technical, I can just go ahead and
Okay,
first and foremost, I want to thank all of the staff members of Magruder High School. Although I was not present at the school for very long, I believe close to 5 months now, I feel like I've been there my entire time with MCPS. Everyone pulled themselves together and allowed me to focus on my duties at hand, which made it very easy for me to just stay focused and get the job done. And I don't think I could have done that without the entire team that came together for this unfortunate incident. It was a trying time. I did not expect for my day to end the way that it did, but I'm glad that all the key people were present that allowed us to make it through the day with everyone being safe, everyone being healthy and able to go home. I know the victim himself, although he did not expect to go to the hospital, I'm glad he was able to make it there and not to a different location. With the support of Dr. Evans, he did all the necessary steps after I relayed the pertinent information over to him to put the school in a proper lockdown, no one in, no one out, and start accountability for all those that were involved. Very happy that we have the safety system within the school, allowing us to monitor every hallway, every staircase, and every exterior point of the building to allow us to not only state, but verify that the school is in a proper lockdown condition. That being said, I'm a little blank on everything that transpired after that because I tend to get tunnel vision and keep straight ahead, getting the job done. So if anyone has any questions or concerns, I'll be more than happy to try to fill those in.
and Mr. Nelson, just to answer another question about the size of your team, I believe you have, if I'm correct, you have how many folks on your security team?
During that particular day, there was 4 of us on that security team. That would be Mr. Bobby Vereen. That would also be Miss Marjorie Lincoln, Myrna Clegg. And on that particular day, we also had an assisting security assistant, Mr. Gregory from Lakeland's Middle School, who's assisting us right now while they're on a virtual learning.
Thank you. So, Mr. Davis, there are a lot of questions sort of about communication and sort of communication routines. I don't know, Chris, if you wanted to speak to what our standard operating procedure is around communication, or if families weren't getting messages, sort of how we pull their information.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for letting me address that. Communications was a joint effort. There were communications coordination coming from key staff on location, key staff in central office, and also working with the police department. As Chief Jones said earlier, there was a need to be careful with our communications, but we did reach out, as you indicated earlier in the slide, all those times, including one other that wasn't there, to let people know that we were still in lockdown, that we were working with police, that action was being taken to do everything we can to resolve the situation. But again, we had to be careful. Communications out to the community is also potentially communications to any suspect, and we have to be careful what we say.
Thank you.
So just looking at additional themes, Dr. Sergo, and again, we should have prefaced that we are trying our best to group based on theme. So just wanted our audience to know if we don't ask your specific question, we're trying to be most efficient in asking themes. It does not mean we won't have additional opportunities to get your questions answered. There is another question around procedures, lockdown procedures. I do see that, just understanding, you spoke a little bit to the training that goes on for our staff, but just understanding exactly what that looks like. If you wouldn't mind one of you unpacking that for our audience.
Yes, sir, Mr. Davis, I'll take that. That is one of the required drills that the Maryland State Department of Education has of all public schools in the state of Maryland. In Montgomery County Public Schools, we've worked with our Montgomery County police partners to not only have our lockdown protocols, but certainly what we would do in the event of a critical active shooter situation. As we've heard Chief Jones say, we did not have that. So Dr. Evans and his team correctly and appropriately and timely initiated a building-wide lockdown. So when that has occurred, the staff will immediately sort of go outside of their doors. We call very quickly sweep scan, unless they were to hear the sounds of gunshots, to bring any other students or adults into that classroom to ensure their safety. Then they are put in the safest position within that classroom setting. We strongly encourage to silence any technology going into the safe mode of one's cell phone there. And then we wait for further direction from either the building principal, who would be the administrator in charge, or in this case, making sure that we had the appropriate authority from Chief Jones and his team to provide communication updates throughout this crisis yesterday. So that's how things worked. We know that we were in a prolonged state of lockdown yesterday. We really, really appreciate the understanding of the staff, the students, and the parents. And we've also heard from Chief Jones why that took so long. I also want to just kind of share with our community here today that these are very dynamic and very fluid situations that change from 1 minute to another. And things change based on current information that is accurate and thorough. So this is an ongoing process. There was planning going on ahead as to what we need to do when we got to the point where things were stabilized and we start to begin the parent reunification process.
There are a number of questions, I think, for Chief Jones, just in terms of the police response. Chief Jones, did you want to speak to what the standard operating procedure is for a police response?
Yes. One thing I want to make sure people understand is that, when we have these types of incidents in a large school setting as such as Magruder, it requires a variety of different resources. So when you see the numbers of police cars that were actually on scene yesterday, there's a variety of roles that those officers play in a situation such as this. Again, knowing that we would have had to possibly do a room by room search of the school would have required a numerous amount of resources. We needed those resources on site. We had investigators who were doing a variety of their responsibilities on site. We had command staff. So I wanted to make sure that people understand what's their role. Again, unfortunately, that we have to, we utilize the best of our staff in order to have these high dynamic situations when you have a gun, for example, that has been utilized in this particular crime. Again, it requires, providing units that provide the safety, the best possible outcome, because they've been trained to do it the right way. And so when we look at, for example, members from our as people know it as a SWAT team, the reasons why we bring those individuals in, because they are amongst the best trained individuals to be able to deal with these highly volatile types of situations, and to bring, again, these matters to a close in a very safe manner. So from that perspective, these are some of the reasons why you had the high number of, we had traffic control, right, outside of the school to be able to help to monitor and maintain the security of the school as well. And we provided other resources throughout the evening as the day progressed. So, again, it's unfortunate. We had to bring in other, K9 units in order to do some searches for evidence. These are some of the things that, again, from a large police response that you will get that we will handle for crime scenes, crowd control, and just an event of this nature just because of the size, again, of the school and the numbers of individuals that are at a location such as the school.
And there are a number of questions specific to sort of future orientation. And I know, Mr. Clark, you began to share about it, but you want to go back to explaining sort of the current approach or absence, if you will, of metal detectors and student search and seizure. Did you want to speak to that at all?
Yes, Dr. Sergo, I can. Certainly, we have administrators who are authorized searchers as well as security staff. If we have reason to believe that a student may be in possession of a weapon, we can ask that student to comply with a self-search. We are currently, we'll be working with Chief Jones and his team when we have these more higher risk situations where we have a gun involved or we suspect that a gun is involved. We are going to ensure that we immediately reach out to our police partners, the CEOs who may be working that school zone that day, make that call to 911 communications so they can get out there. We can brief them. We can come up with a plan, much like a plan that was developed yesterday with the chief and his team at MCPS. What is the best way to then conduct that type of a search for a significant weapon such as a firearm to ensure the safety of all involved there? So we're going to continue to work with that there. Metal detectors, certainly, I think we've heard Dr. Mcknight say we're going to review everything. But I just want to share with you, when we had that tragedy there at Great Mills High School, the superintendent, along with myself and their chief of security, we visited the DC Public School site. And just for everybody's information, that is an unbelievable undertaking when a school system anywhere in this state or in this country commits to that type of weapons mitigation type of a search there. So I think once you go down that road, you're very wed to that in the long terms. But again, we're going to look at all options here and to kind of bring some things forward that might address those gaps that we may uncover throughout the investigation.
Dr. Sergo, let me just add on to what Mr. Clark has said so that our community will know that on a regular basis, whenever we have a concern that a student has a weapon, and especially if we can identify what that weapon might be. And this happens when we have students who are very concerned. We certainly are going to be in contact with our community engagement officer, and in terms of making sure that we use the proper procedures in addressing any incident or anything that we might anticipate could result in a serious incident. So, and that's something that we've been doing for a number of years. And I think all of my administrators are certainly aware of that, as well as every member of our security team are very much aware. So these procedures have been in place throughout. And one of the things I might add that's very important is that we need the help of the community in terms of parents. And we do receive this, sometimes where parents will let us know and communicate a concern to us. That's crucial, and us knowing beforehand what we might anticipate so we can take the kind of proactive preventative actions in order to make sure that we don't have any incident that's going to lead to harm or certainly a fatality in our school. So this is something that as a team, both the administrators and security, that we're very much aware of. And it's almost a natural part of our work together to follow these procedures that are going to guarantee the safety and security of students and staff, including our own. So we're not going to take on anything that we certainly can't handle. And we certainly are going to use every resources we can to ensure the work that we have to do around safety and security.
Sir, if I could add one thing too, we can certainly increase any level of technology, but our number one best proactive or preventive measure is those positive relationships that we develop every day with their children throughout the building, whether from a teacher level, administrative counselor, school security, or in community engagement officers. Those relationships are so critical because when those students identify that trusted adult in their building, they will come forward to report issues of safety and security concerns. So that is our number one defense to maintain and enhance those relationships every single day, especially during the impact that we've seen with COVID-19 for our students and our staff there.
So I can jump in, 2 additional pieces. I believe Dr. Evans and the school team, several, not necessarily a question, but can we recognize our school health team, which I think is most appropriate to do so by name, the school nurse and or the health tech. So just wanted to see if we could elevate that one. I know I didn't want us to leave this space without most definitely recognizing them as well.
So,
First,
go ahead.
no, our nurse is Megan Wilson, and I just want to give a shout out to her. She has been a phenomenal asset to us, and she was on the scene and working with Mr. Nelson and trying to secure the safety of this student, and they did a marvelous job in saving this young man's life while we were waiting for the paramedics with fire and rescue.
Thank you. And then the second one I think will lead to another theme I'm seeing, Dr. Sergo, is about next steps.
Yeah.
Now, where do we go from here? Students who are uncomfortable, what does our safety and security look like on Tuesday? Because remember, it's a professional day on Monday. If we could speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, so thank you for the question. And there are a team of MCPS staff who are currently working together with our county partners and when I say county partners, I'm talking about the Montgomery County government. I want to, give a recognition out to all of the different individuals working. We know that Luis Cardona, who's the administrator for Positive Youth Development, he runs a number of programs, including the wellness centers and the street outreach network called SUN, which is the frontline response for violence in the county. And so we're going to be collaborating both with the MCPS and county networks in order to develop a plan that will be shared back with families around how we're going to respond and support and wrap ourselves around the students and staff. This is where the weekend has benefited us, that we can really put some thought and care into that planning, and we will be communicating back with everyone on Monday so that you know what the plan is at the short and long term. Because certainly, as Dr. Conley Chester indicated, there are degrees of response and they evolve over time. And we want to make sure that as a school team, we are evolving and staying close to this circumstance as it changes. I did want to go back, Mr. Davis, and just touch.
Dr. Sergo.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Mcknight, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to address that, that question specifically, because I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of students and a lot of families are feeling fearful. That is a natural reaction to what has happened. And I don't want them to feel as if we are just moving along and we're not acknowledging that very real feeling. So I just want to say that we acknowledge it and we understand why that is the current feeling. And I think our students need to hear that. When Dr. Conley Chester spoke earlier about the supports, that's why I emphasize they're really important to engage in virtually when we return next week, so that students have an opportunity to process what those fears are driven by. Some of those fears are going to be triggered just when students walk back into the building next week. That was the last place in which they experienced that. And when they come back, they're going to feel differently. So what it is it's our job to be able to first acknowledge that for them and take the time to prepare so that we know where the fears are coming from, and then also hearing what we need to do to address those fears specifically. So we do want our students to return back to the building. And I know that I say that it's not easy. And I know that some of them will feel hesitancy, but I believe as they come back in and they're back with their peers and they're back within the comfort of the staff and they're back within the comfort of security and everybody who's been thinking about what we're going to do. Mr. Nelson, we talked about him going through and monitoring the restrooms. Of course, when we come back, I'm sure we're going to put some support at Magruder and as well in the other schools to make sure we have enough people and we have more people walking around the building, making sure. I also want to emphasize it's all of our responsibility to create the environment to help everyone feel safe in coming back. So if we know something, we need to say something. If there's something going on that will allow the school and the staff to get ahead of any problem or any situation that's happening, then we can respond and react when we have the information. And so again, and this comes down to our students as well as our families. I know parents, sometimes you're listening and hearing things that are happening. You know, if you feel comfortable calling the school and letting us know, you know, let us know. And then Mr. Clark spoke about this, but we're absolutely going to turn over every stone in our processes to really take the time and look at what is it that we need to do, keep doing, do more of, do differently as a result of that. And we're not even 24 hours out of this incident. What I don't want us to do is rush and say that we're going to do something and it's not the right thing. And we haven't heard the voices of our staff and our students and our families and those who've experienced that, Dr. Evans, everyone. And then we end up not making the most impactful decisions. So we do want to take the time to do that. And as we do that, we need our students and our staff there to be able to engage in these conversations so that we can make our entire school system within the county a better and more comfortable school system based on what we've learned from this unfortunate incident. So I thought it was important to say that because I know those fears are real, but we got to be there together and we got to be able to move on from it. And in order to do that, we got to spend some time learning more about what's driving those fears and what we can do to address it. Thank you.
No, thank you, Dr. Mcknight. I think that those comments really resonated with everyone. And I think the last piece that we wanted to just highlight is to go back. There are a number of questions about communication. And I think for some individuals, when you're in this circumstance, you give them just enough. For others, it's too much. And for others, it's not enough. We did want to specifically return to some questions about the information that was put out. And it's important to know, and I want to go back to what was shared by others, that everything that was shared was accurate at the time that it was shared. And that is certainly speaks to the dynamic nature of what occurred. I was actually one of the first people there. And at the time that I arrived, all we knew was that we had an injured student who was being transported to the hospital. And we were in a lockdown out of an abundance of caution. And that was why that first Connect Ed said that. There was not someone running around the building with a weapon. We didn't know anything that we could tell, but we wanted to tell families something because we knew that there were a lot of rumors, there was conjecture, there was concern. And so we know that when information is changing so quickly, it starts to make you think, well, why did you say that then? And now you're saying this. But please know that when those of us who are on the ground were giving the most accurate picture that we could to reassure families who were not in the building and watching things unfold and giving you the best information that we could at the time. And so I want to go back to what Mr. Clark shared specifically about sort of how we autopsy these circumstances. And there is a requirement, and Ed, I'll kick it over to you in a moment, and we will be completely analyzing not only what occurred, but our total response to this. Learning from what did we do right? What did we do well? Where are there places that we could be refining things? Where are the places we need to circle back to, whether it be reviewing lockdown procedures with staff, whether it be looking at different sort of communication routines. So we have a commitment, not only to ourselves, but to you and to our students and staff, that we'll be looking at this circumstance from every angle and making sure that we walk away better for it in terms of understanding how to best provide a safe and secure learning environment. Mr. Clark, did you want to speak to the sort of federal approach or the requirements around that review that I just shared?
Yes, Dr. Sir. Again, we mentioned briefly the Maryland Safe to Learn Act. That act was created following the tragedy of Great Mills High School. So throughout the state of Maryland, whenever there's this type of a critical incident, we are all required to sit down at the table with Chief Jones, the accompanying public safety officials from Fire and Rescue, Mr. McCarthy, the State's Attorney's Office, and really have an objective lessons learned conversation. Then we are required by the law to submit a report to the Maryland Center for School Safety. The Maryland Center for School Safety then will evaluate that report. They will be a participant in that after action critique and review. And then they are required by law to submit a report to the governor. and to the Maryland State Legislature in terms of what occurred, opportunities for enhancements. So we will be following that law specifically. And as Dr. Mcknight said, evaluating from top to bottom what we have in place, how we can make improvements, identify those gaps. Dr. Sergo, I just want to say one thing to our Magruder community here. They have an outstanding leader in Dr. Lee Evans. Dr. Lee Evans, for many, many years, has been a champion of school safety and security. Dr. Evans, in working with our sheriff, Sheriff Popkin, has had a long-standing positive partnership with the sheriff's deputies as CEOs and school resource officers. As was mentioned by Chief Jones, Sergeant Jason Capetta from the Sheriff's Department was that first law enforcement officer on the scene. He immediately jumped into action there as well. I think he followed you, Dr. Sergo, but I just wanted to really share with our parent community that the ongoing and sustained commitment that Dr. Evans has had recently, prior to COVID really impacting us, he opened his school doors off on an off day. Members of the 6th District Patrol team came in there. They had the opportunity to be trained with the county SWAT team in room maneuvers. So that's why it's important that we continue to work with Chief Jones, all of our municipal partners for this high-level type of training so we can be prepared in the event of when these crises hit us on a moment's notice.
And Mr. Clark, I just wanted to speak to one more thing that's come up, which is what an actual lockdown is. And so what we want to remind you is that when there is a call for a lockdown, when that call is made, the teachers are trained to do what's called a sweep and scan, which means they basically go to their doorway, they open it, they look in the hall and they sweep. And if there are any students in the hall, even if they are not sort of registered to their course, they bring them into their classroom and secure that room. And so I just wanted to let families know that that is a typical process, but we certainly will be continuing to look at some of the comments you've raised about lockdown procedures not being followed with fidelity as we continue to debrief. So, Mr. Davis.
Dr. Sergo, yes, and I'm looking at our time here. I know I said an hour at the beginning. Thank you all. We just thought it was so important to be able to recognize and to also be able to respond to as many questions as possible. So we are starting to wind down. Just wanted everyone to know that, but I did see something in the Q&A that I wanted to elevate. I believe this is for you, Dr. Evans, and others can respond, but it says, beyond caring for our students, is there anything the school needs or parents can do to help support our efforts in the coming days? We are grateful to you, the teachers, and everyone who kept our students safe.
Well, thank you, Mr. Davis, and thank you to whoever asked that question. And I think it's very, very simple. We need your help. And that help comes in the form of collaboration and enhanced involvement in this partnership and trust. And we will earn your trust if you give us the opportunity. And certainly the idea of patience, we realize that things are changing. We have some new challenges that have been increased by a number of different things in our society. But it isn't any doubt that when we work together, we're going to achieve a whole lot more than if we work apart. Separatism, especially now, is not a luxury that we can afford. So I would answer that question by saying, being able to collaborate, going to the PTSA meetings, and certainly if you have any questions or concerns, reach out to your child's administrator. All of the members of my team are readily available, and not just in terms of, their willingness. They have a great deal of passion for the work that they do and compassion for the needs of the students that they work and supervise at every grade level. So we need your help, first and foremost, by working directly with us, by making us aware of any concerns that you may have or anything that you feel might be a threat. And there are a number of services that we can provide to you as a family. So it's working together as a school community and looking at and how we can work through. This will be a huge test for us. We have not had anything like this in our community, and I would submit to you that one reason why we didn't is because we've been prepared. We've received a lot of information from parents. We need to continue that, perhaps raise the level, because we have some new parents. Many of our ninth graders have their parents, for them, this is their first high school. So we need to continue to work together in the spirit of, doing the most that we can do, which is the best we can, for the students that we serve together. We're the adults in their lives, and we have to come together on their behalf. And so I would just say, I appreciate that question, and even more so on behalf of my entire staff, we appreciate your involvement and trust in us. So we're looking forward to working with you through this situation and in preparation for anything else that may happen, and then continue our mission as an academic institution. So thank you so much. I welcome your involvement. And certainly at this level, we need it more than ever before. Yes, the students might tell you they can do it without you, but that's not true. They need you more than ever during these trying times for a number of reasons, and we're willing to work with you. So thank you for that question, and thank you for your involvement and participation in the work that we have to do in the Magruder service area and our cluster.
So thank you, Dr. Evans, and especially for that reminder that safety and security is a responsibility, shared responsibility among all of our stakeholders. I truly appreciate that. And I think it was very appropriate for you as the principal to have the last word, but I did want to yield to the panel just to see if there was anything else before we do conclude.
Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Vega Ormeño. I am very proud assistant principal of Magruder. I oversee the 9th grade class, and I just wanted to remind everyone in terms of communication. I know Dr. Sturgo has answered various Q&A questions already, but the messaging system that Magruder uses contact information on file for each student. So if you did not receive the communication that we sent out during the incident, please make sure that you sign on to Parent View, check off that you're receiving those notifications, and make sure you have the correct phone number and email addresses for both parents and or guardians that are involved on the contact list. And also you can follow us on Twitter at MagruderHS. We also sent out communication that way. So just so that everyone can be on the same page as much as possible. We're doing our best to be as transparent as possible and provide information when it's readily available.
Mr. Davis, this is Chief Jones. I would just like to make one statement, just to make sure that the community knows, this Magruder community know that Montgomery County Police, and I'm sure that I spoke with Sheriff Popkin last night because I know that the deputy sheriff is assigned as the community engagement officer for this cluster, but I will give you all my, and Dr. Evans and Dr. Mcknight, my commitment that we will provide any resource that the school needs in the coming weeks and throughout the rest of the school year, what you will need in order to provide a safe environment for that school. That has always been my commitment in the midst of all of the discussion about school safety, that I've always been and made sure that people know that the police department is committed to keeping our school system safe. And that has not wavered at all. In my thought process, we'll provide more resources if needed in order to make sure that Magruder is a safe community. And we are going to help and work with all of you in order to be able to make that happen. So that people are, and our young students and our staff are not fearful about coming to school and doing their work every single day. So thank you all again for the opportunity to speak today. And we are again still working to make this community a safer place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Jones. Just wanted to, one more pause before we do wrap up.
Just want to thank
Mcknight.
you for coming. I really appreciate the families taking the time out to come and participate in this discussion, to hear more details of exactly what happened, so that we could hear what's on your mind. And of course, so that we can work together, as you have heard the theme already mentioned, moving forward to do whatever we need to do to support the Magruder cluster, Magruder High School overall after this incident has impacted that community and our school system. So I want to thank you and I ask you to continue to be engaged. Let's continue to work together and care for one another as we move through this process. And I do hope that you all are able to process and have some time today to just step away and engage in some self-care for yourselves as well. Thank you, and I'm proud to have the staff and the students and the families who are part of this cluster feeling like you are engaged and care so much that you want to be a part of this discussion, and most importantly, you want to be a part of the solution moving forward. So we look forward to it, continuing to engage you. And thank you to all the staff who put this together so quickly. I know last night was a late night for many of us and an early morning for planning, but I want to thank you all for coming together to make sure we had this time with the community, because it was time well spent.
Thank you very much. We did record our session today, and so we will make sure we return to you with the best way of sharing that information. Please see in the chat some additional information around support resources for today. And thank you so much for your time.
Take care and be well, everyone.